One of the big issues as we head into the general elections less than a year from now will be jobs. But here's the problem. We just don't have authentic one-stop data that we can rely on. In fact, that's exactly what the Prime Minister said in an interview recently to a news magazine. So we have all kinds of numbers that are thrown at us, from the National Sample Survey Organization to the Labour Ministry to the EPFO and other organizations like the private CMIE. Now, Surjit Bhalla is one of the economists who advises the Prime Minister on his advisory council. He has just submitted a report which claims that contrary to the narrative that we've been seeing so far, India has in fact added nearly 13 million jobs in 2017. However, this data has been disputed by another reputed organization, a private organization called the CMIE, which regularly measures employment figures and claims in fact that the job numbers are not looking so good in the near future. Nimisha Jaiswal has the story.
The most optimistic figures on job growth coming from Surjit Bhalla, a member of the PM's Economic Advisory Council. The post-demonetization period, especially 2017 to 2018, is the most contentious. The Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy, a private organization, found no significant job loss or gain in 2017, based on its own surveys. The government's Employee Provident Fund Department says it's 7 million jobs added in the formal sector. Another government department, the Labour Bureau, puts it at 10 million jobs, based on quarterly jobs data. But now Surjit Bhalla, using the government's data, GDP figures and independent surveys, says it's 12.8 million jobs. So isn't that too optimistic? Curiously far better than the government's own data. Bhalla calls this payback.
The 12.8 million job gain should be seen in the context of a payback, because you had 2 years to 3 years of very low job growth. Now you have a expanding economic activity. For you to expect, or for anybody to expect that the job growth will not be robust, will either have to be CMIE, in which case they actually think with GDP growth accelerating, construction growth going up, road construction going up, the job growth has actually gone down.
While Bhalla's report claims that the CMIE shows a job loss of 2 million in 2017, the CMIE chief told NDTV that the report's claim is wrong.
The gap is because of a very big difference in the way we compute the numbers. So I have many problems with what they have done with the data. Besides picking some data selectively, they have also processed it in very innovative ways.
The US puts out new jobs data every month, but this report comes in the middle of no independent survey. The centre and opposition continue to fight about job creation as we get closer and closer to the general elections. In New Delhi, this is Nimisha Jaiswal for NDTV.
Well, we have Surjit Bhalla joining us here in the studio, and it's great to have on the panel with you today two eminent economists, Arun Kumar and Ila Patnaik. Welcome to all of you, and it's refreshing to have no politicians on the panel. So, Surjit Bhalla, some skepticism already about the numbers in your report. Why are you sounding so optimistic about jobs, whereas some others are not?
Well, the some others is one individual, one firm, CMIE. As my report makes clear, that there are 5 different estimates for job growth in 2017-18. And it so happens that most of the estimates fall between 7 million, which is the Ghosh and Ghosh estimate based on EPFO, and 12.8 million, which is based on the report by Tita Das and me. So for you to say there's already skepticism is a bit erroneous, a bit biased, if I may say so, because there's
Why is it biased?
Because
the CMIE has a point of view.
4 out of 5.
Everyone who disagrees with you is not biased, and people can ask you questions about your data.
I will. For example,
and as
this person who disagrees with me says that we compute things differently. I don't know how CMI computes, but all the estimates, all the data, whether it is NSSO or the Labour Bureau or the CMIE, is processed in exactly the same way by us. So therefore, we are not treating any data differently. That's the point number 1. And the same person says that we computed imaginatively or something like that. I think it's just, there's a 45-page report, and it'll behoove all of us to read that and then be critical. I'm absolutely, and as you know, in the article I had stated that, listen, we're going to have the NSSO data for 2017-18 come back sometime later on this year. And I have explicitly said, I don't know whether my estimate is correct or wrong, but that data, when it comes, will be the final arbiter. I'm not making any excuses beforehand. If I get it wrong, if we have got it wrong, we've got it wrong. And I think the same should apply to anybody else making an estimate.
We've done an interview with Mahesh Vyas of the CMIE, whose reports are widely published across newspapers, web portals, in India. So, obviously the CMIE may disagree with you, but does have a certain credibility that it also brings to the table. They have a different point of view. No, I did ask him why the data is so different. If people were to watch this today, 12.8 million versus Mahesh Vyas, who's saying, actually, he's not saying, by the way, that 12 million jobs were lost last year. He's saying there wasn't any significant increase or decrease, and that he's not very, things are not looking so great for the next year or two.
First of all, to state, look, the CMIE data shows the following. As it shows that there were 1.5 million jobs were created. But if you adjust it the same way that we adjust all the data with population estimates from census, it turns out that the CMIE data shows that 2 million jobs were lost. So first of all, it's not significant difference one way or the other. What you have is an estimate of a 2 million loss in India in 2017 versus every other estimate that's upwards of 7 million. So first of all, we need to put that into a proper perspective. As our report has outlined, we define our terms very clearly, we give all the data very clearly, and we give our methodology a complete description, so you can take it. Now, our methodology is no different than what the NSSO does. NSSO is the benchmark, is really the basis.
It's actually also remarkable that that data hasn't come for so many years. But let me just get first comments from Arun Kumar and Ila Patnaik on this. Professor Arun Kumar, what are your first thoughts on Surjit Bhalla's report?
I haven't read his report, so I can't really comment on that. But what I would do is suggest that, India doesn't have a problem of unemployment, it has more a problem of underemployment. People don't have social security, so you can't say, I'll not work, I'll die, So what you do is you do a little bit of head load work, you do a little thela pushing, you do some other kind of job, and they get counted as employed. But actually it's residual employment, So what we are worried about is the organized sector employment and the unorganized sector employment. The unorganized sector employment counts everybody. So when somebody says that 15 million people are coming to the job market and therefore 15 million people are doing work, that's fine. But what kind of work are they doing? Are they getting a proper job? Or like happened, 90,000 jobs in railways and you had 23 million people applying, with high skills, not necessarily based on what kind of job is being done. So I'm worried about where are we counting them. So unorganized sector people, are they getting counted as organized now? Because in the EPFO, you've had change of rules. First, it was proposed in 2008 that earlier you counted everybody above 20 employment. Now you said between 10 and 20 also will count, and that rule was brought in 2016. And
that's why you're saying more people got added to EPFO.
So more people could be counted who were earlier contract workers in the organized sector, etc. They're probably getting counted. Okay, so that's not new employment generation. Second thing is, if you look at the budgets, last 3 budgets, concessions have been given that if you register new people in the EPFO, then the government will pay the EPFO. Then the second was that in certain sectors which are employment intensive, if you actually give new jobs, then you'll get 30% tax concession. So a lot of people would have, brought in new people and fired the old people possibly. So there are a lot of things that are confusing about it as to how many jobs in the organized sector you've created and how many of the unorganized sector getting counted in the unorganized. My own judgment is that probably what's happening is that those who are in the unorganized sector as contract workers, etc., are getting counted. So it's not new employment generation, it's the way you count it, where do you count it, what kind of counting you do.
Okay, Ila Patnaik, your first thoughts.
So I think it's the wrong question to ask. I don't think we should be thinking of jobs as a whole. Not because I want to get into the fight between Mahesh Vyas and Surjit Bhalla. That's going to be a very difficult one to get into. But because let's look at what's happening in the economy. Let's just put the numbers aside, and we know they're not being well measured. So let's put that aside. What's happening in the economy, the 2 big things that happened in the economy were demonetization and GST. Now, even if I knew nothing about India and I just landed here from another planet, I would have said both these would hit informal sector jobs. GST should. I mean, the whole logic of the GST is that informal sector firms, firms that were not part of the chain of taxation, will lose advantage while the others will get advantage. Second, we also know that the formal sector firms they employ less labor per unit of capital. So, as employment moves, as production moves, we should actually expect that there should be job losses in the informal sector and job gains in the formal sector. Now, if I look at the Ghosh and Ghosh report, and maybe there are various reasons why PF numbers are showing an improvement, but let us just take them on their face value, then it seems formal sector jobs are increasing. That does not surprise me. Similarly, if I look at the CMIE numbers which come on the basis of household surveys, where there are a lot of households who seem to have lost jobs for the category 16 to 25, for women, particularly younger women, and for older men, whereas the jobs for the men in their prime age category have remained the same. Then also I find that very believable, because in all other economies also we see that it is the vulnerable sections who get hit when jobs get hit.
So, are you saying there is a little bit of truth in all of this?
In both, at least both the CMI and the Ghosh and Ghosh study. And it is also what intuitively I think should be happening, and it should not just finish this year, but that is the trend that should continue next year as well, because we are in transition. We are in transition from an economy.
The question is very simply, do we have a jobs problem or not?
It is not that simple a question. If you were to create more informal sector jobs, would you say your jobs problem is done? I wouldn't. I would say no, because jobs have to transition from the informal to the formal. So, just looking at the aggregate, even if Surjit is right, even if more jobs have been created, but a few of them have been created in the informal sector and let us say more in the formal, it does not solve India's problem.
Does your report look at what kind of jobs? Let us take a look at what Arun Kumar is saying. What kind of jobs are being created? So, if there were 13 million jobs, what were they? What kind of, or most of them?
And the report actually goes into quite a bit of detail on that, as to how is the result of 12.8 million jobs consistent with what we know about macroeconomic data, and which answers Ila's question and also Arun's question. Construction has been known to be one of the biggest job creators per unit of output, and in an RBI study, the elasticity is basically you get for each 1% increase in construction GDP, you get 1.13% gain in employment.
Can I butt in?
Yeah.
Surjit, you are assuming the elasticities have remained the same.
No,
whereas, yeah, I've read your report.
Let me just.
No, that's why I'm butting in. That you must address that question as well.
Yes, absolutely. And somebody asked me actually, your reporters asked me, okay, what about artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence hasn't come yet into construction. So construction, as we know it, is still an old, but theoretically what Ila is saying is right. Elasticities do not remain constant, but this was as of 2011. So we have to argue that somehow the entire construction industry has changed in the last 5 years. I don't think that's happened.
But your report does talk about a growth in construction.
Let's look at what happened to GDP in construction. 5.8% growth, which is the highest growth rate in the last 6 years. Second, the acceleration. The last time we had 5.8% construction growth was in 2011-12. Second, the acceleration, the increase in GDP in construction went up by 4.7 percentage points, which is the highest since 1998. So in other words, we haven't had this expansion in construction as we had this year.
So you're saying that was the prime mover?
No, I'm not saying that at all is a prime mover. I'm saying that is one indicator. You want to know macroeconomic indicators, I'll come to the other macroeconomic indicators. 2014 and 2015 were drought years, and nobody has yet argued that drought years are good for employment. 2016 we had demonetization at the end of the year, and 2017 we had
GST.
the beginnings of the GST and uncertainty. The point being that after 2 drought years, so forget everything else, that I believe that 2017-18 estimate that we've got is a payback. That is to say, you didn't have too much job growth in the first 2 years, and now as the economy, you can look at GDP data, etc., is expanding. One other important point in the report for all of us, whether we are thinking about unemployment, whether we're thinking about the important issue of electoral politics and etc., is that the Indian economy now needs only 8 million jobs in order for there to be the employment rate to stay the same, or the unemployment rate to stay the same. So back 6 years ago, 8 years ago, we needed 10 to 12 million jobs. Now the demographics are such that over the next 5 years, we only need less than 8 million jobs.
I just wanted to say about this construction sector. You know, there also you have a very large unorganized sector. The data for the unorganized sector doesn't come in, you know. So what you have, the elasticity is based on the organized sector data only, okay. The unorganized sector got hit, as Ila was saying, and as we've all been arguing, the GST, etc., hit the unorganized sector very badly. And one of the things that you can see is how the Manrega demand dramatically rose after demonetization. You know, it rose suddenly by a factor of 4 or 5, and people said that if there was enough money, it would have gone up by a factor of 10, because large number of people migrated from urban areas to rural areas. Second is credit offtake declined dramatically. Third is that it's in the infrastructure sector that you have the large NPAs. Private investment fell. So government investment may have gone up, but the private investment, which is much larger, that actually fell. So in other words, you know, I'd have to look at the data more carefully, what Surjit is saying. In the report? Yeah, maybe, but the point is I'd have a lot of doubts about it, because construction has also got very highly mechanized. You know, I remember 20, 30 years back when I saw a road project, there'd be hundreds of people working. Now there'd be 10 people with big machines, you know, working. So the employment elasticity in the construction sector, if you look at the organized sector itself, has declined. If you add the unorganized sector, it probably has declined further. I'd like to see how Surjit has taken that into account.
Okay, let me get Mahesh Vyas's view into this, and I did invite him for this debate. He wasn't keen to do a debate. So here is my interview with Mahesh Vyas of the CMIE. Surjit Bhalla, this is just for you. Let's begin. I began by asking him, Mahesh Vyas, your first thoughts basically on what Surjit Bhalla's report says about 13 million jobs being created last year. Do you think it adds up?
No, it doesn't. We do the survey and we make the estimations regularly. We make the estimations almost daily. So we are tracking this very closely, and there is no way in which we can see 12 or 13 million jobs created in 2017 or 2017-18. So no, I do not agree with Bhalla's inferences.
But how do you think that Surjit Bhalla reached this conclusion? I mean, he has done a study, and it is, after all, a report that is so very different from what the CMIE is saying about the job scene.
Well, you know, I went through the report, at least did the first pass on it, and I found several errors or problems in it, technical ones. So I have written to him, and I have pointed out the errors, and I hope to have a conversation or an engagement with him and the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, for whom this report is made, to resolve these issues. But I think these are technical issues, and I will wait for them to respond to my observations.
But Mahesh Vyas, I think the question really is, why is there such a big discrepancy in the data? You have the 13 million jobs that Surjit Bhalla talks about on one hand, and you know, he's saying you're talking about 2 million jobs lost in 2017. So who are people to believe?
So let me first make one correction. The claim in the report by Bhalla and Das that according to CMI's numbers, 2 million jobs were lost in 2017-18 is incorrect. CMI has not said that 2 million jobs are lost in 2017. So that is his creation from the numbers, and that's not CMI's claim. So there is a gap nevertheless, and I would say that the CMI methodology of computing these numbers is straightforward. We do a survey, we do estimations by normal conventional means. All our methodologies are established ones used globally everywhere. I'm doing nothing different, and I think there the estimates will come out with are quite correct. So I would be very happy for anyone to engage with us, to see our methodology, to see our execution, to see our numbers, and I am very confident we'll come out quite right in this. But if we are wrong, we'll be happy to correct ourselves.